You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're taking a look at the social networking site Facebook. The website is set for an initial public offering this week that could see the company valued at more than $100 billion. That IPO valuation, comparable to the internet shopping giant Amazon, doesn't come without a degree of controversy. Some say the share value of between $34 and $38 is exaggerated by a combination of hype and optimistic predictions of future growth. But the company and its 28-year-old hoodie-wearing co-founder Mark Zuckerberg are no strangers to controversy. The website has been massively successful since its launch in 2004, building up a legion of some 900 million users. But they have also been blasted for abusing the privacy of users and damaging the fabric of society in the real world. So, will Facebook become a permanent fixture of the virtual world or a footnote in .com history? Is it a catalyst for online democracy or an abusive peddler of private data? And are our lives becoming any richer because of online social media? To probe these questions, we're hosting a discussion in our London studios. I'm joined by Andy Williamson, an expert in digital democracy and social media, Jim Killock, who runs the civil liberties body, the Open Rights Group, Andrew McCulloch, who runs the Mental Health Foundation, and over the line from Moscow by Peter Lekarev, our in-house technology commentator. Okay, to start the ball rolling, I'd like to get a single sentence answer from each of you to the following question, maybe starting with you, Andy Williamson. Is Facebook really worth $100 billion?
No, of course it isn't. If you do it on the financial calculations, it's worth sort of 50 to 65 billion, so they say. I'm not an expert in that. But as usual, it's technology being hyped.
Jim Killock?
I don't think we know yet, but I don't think it's actually the important question. I think the important question is what will happen as a result of it being on the stock market, and will that make it less privacy friendly, or will it improve its behaviour? And I rather fear the former.
Okay, and Andrew?
Well, it's worth whatever people will pay for it, I suppose, but I think the important issue is that Facebook is just one social media application, and what we've got to think about is the impact of social media generally.
Okay, sure. And finally, Peter?
I believe it's overrated, and people think it's really overhyped.
Okay. Andy Williamson, you gave it a kind of stock value pricing of 50 to 65 billion. Why do you think it's been inflated in its value in this way?
An exciting technology like Facebook is always talked up because you're looking at potential value. And of course they want to talk it up. They want it to be worth a lot more because that's good for the investment. But I think Jim's point is the important one. It's not the value of the shares, it's the impact on the users and on society that floating something like Facebook is going to have.
And Peter, why do you think it's been overhyped?
What does it offer? What kind of monetization? Basically, you would not invest in something unless you think you can get something in return. That is correct. And if you're investing, probably you hope some sort of revenue. And the revenue comes from advertisement and mostly from applications at this point of time, from microtransactions that people pay to use some sort of applications that are inside of Facebook. And advertisements are currently, they're not as popular as people would like them to be. And the reason for that is that they're not targeted enough. So the only way to currently increase the revenue flow is to give up some of users' privacy so the advertisements can become actually more targeted and more relevant to users' interest in hopes they would actually work. And this basically would put Facebook under a lot of heavy fire, even from legislators, I believe. So I don't really see how this could make a lot more money than it is already making, and thus, as a long-term investment, it is not a good idea. And also, we should not forget that before Facebook, there was MySpace, then there were blogs, and even before that, there were homepages. So the Internet, the social medium, is always evolving, and Facebook may not be the final destination. Maybe there will be something else, something new that people will actually flock to, and thus put themselves and their revenue-making potential. Facebook is based on the users. The more users it has, the more popular it is, then the more money it can potentially bring. If the dynamics will go down, then the price will naturally go down as well.
If it's based on the number of users it has, 900 million users worldwide. I mean, if it were to be a country with a 900 million population, that would make it the sort of third or fourth most populous country in the world. That's a lot of people. But how does it make money out of them? Because I look at my Facebook page, and I think I've been on Facebook myself for, 5 years at least. And I don't think I've ever given my credit card details or given the company $1. So how does it make any money?
Well, there's Farmville, there is Mafia Wars, there's a throng of different apps that suck the money from users that are willing to give. I myself never played them, and I understand you also never played. But Farmville is so established in our society. There's been even a South Park episode based on Facebook, and people just pay little sums of money to get some bonuses in these games and applications. This is a steady source of revenue. I forget how much percent it actually gives to the total amount, but the bulk of it comes from advertisements, as I said. Advertisers are putting a lot of money in hopes that all these messages that you see cluttering the page, these are all paid advertisements. And the thing is, lately, researchers show they don't really work that well.
Why don't they work so well?
People don't click them. People just ignore them. And have you clicked an advertisement on Facebook personally?
To be honest, you hear a lot about adverts on websites being perfectly tailor-made to the individual who wants to use them. I mean, I've got my Facebook page up in front of me now, and for example, two of the biggest ads on it are, do I want to put some money in the campaign funds of Barack Obama or Mitt Romney? And I mean, I'm not in the US, so I think they're probably doing something wrong there. I see an advert on mine at the moment for McDonald's. Wouldn't dream of eating there.
That's what I'm talking about. In order to make them really tailor-made, Facebook would have to give up user privacy. And it is unlikely they will do that. So basic advertisers are wasting money, as you can see.
Maybe turning back to you, Andy, in the studio. I understand that the profits of Facebook last year were only $1 billion. Maybe the company isn't quite as financially successful as it could be.
Well, if you look at the revenue, it's been going up by over $1 billion a year for the last 3 years. So it's certainly doing something right, but it certainly doesn't justify the kind of stock value that's being put on it. It was $3.7 billion last year, so it's not insignificant. And the stat that Peter was looking for was Zynga, who write Farmville. They account for 12% of the revenue. But the thing we've got to remember in here is Peter's question is, how do you monetize Facebook? We monetize it. We are their product. And I think that's a really important point that we shouldn't lose. The information that we voluntarily or maybe sometimes inadvertently enter into Facebook is the product. The value isn't just in the adverts that pop up. It's in what that data says underneath, the trends that you can mine through it, the patterns, the likes, the links. You know, the volume of data that's put in Facebook is huge. It's almost incomprehensible.
I'd like to say something on that. I think if you think that the company's overvalued and people are putting a lot of money into something which is really not worth it and is not producing the revenue that ought to be created by the amount of investment going into it, then there's going to be huge pressure to ramp that profit up. So the question posed, will user privacy be sacrificed in order to better target adverts? Well, then there's pressure for that, isn't there? There's a sort of two evils coming together, if you like, or two pressures coming together. You've got a pressure for profit and you've got an obvious opportunity in removing or reducing user privacy. And that's going to be, I think, very difficult for them to negotiate unless they find some other business model yet to be discovered. I think the thing that's really valuable about Facebook from the point of view of other companies as opposed to investors, though, is their user base. So it is the data in there, but it's also the fact that you've got lots and lots of active users. And I think there is another danger here. Is at some point Facebook going to get bought up by somebody we don't like? Up till now, it's been a private company owned by a small number of individuals. We might not trust them absolutely, but they are, at the end of the day, private individuals. So what happens to this 900 million people's data when it gets sold to another company? And who might that company be? Might it be, say, Baidu from China? Might it be Microsoft? And are the dangers if one of these companies ends up buying effectively 900 million people's user data? And will they then treat it with the same degree of privacy as Facebook have? Not that they've got great reputation on that, but somebody else might be even worse. And I think this is one of the big dangers here. We have basically a company we don't know the future of. We don't know who's going to own it, and we don't know what their business model or privacy practices are going to be like in the future. And there's very little to put brakes on that right now.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're taking a look at the social networking site Facebook. I'm joined by Andy Williamson, an expert in digital democracy and social media, Jim Killock, who runs the civil liberties body, the Open Rights Group, Andrew McCulloch, who runs the Mental Health Foundation, and over the line from Moscow by Peter Lekarev, our in-house technology commentator. Jim, that was something that I was hoping to get onto. This idea of Facebook having a lot of data about us and the relationship Facebook has with companies. Perhaps you can just go into a bit more detail about this. I go on the Facebook website. I know that they know what year I was born in. I know they've got a few sort of biographical details about me. And I guess I know they're able to follow and track some of the websites I visit and stuff like that. But what kind of level of data are they compiling about me as an individual? And what are they doing with it?
Well, they store everything. I mean, they've got fairly dreadful data practices. They don't delete anything. If you sort of delete a user or a friend or something, that connection isn't lost to its database, it's kept. It just marks it as this user no longer keeps in contact. And you change your name, your birth name, whatever, that's stored. The deleted copies are all stored. So there's some problems in that. The main thing, though, is you're the social graph, if you think about it, is who are you in contact with? What are your interests? Where are your connections? Where actually is the network of individuals that you have? But it also will know a lot about your location, either through your internet protocol address, your IP address, or because you put the information in, or because you've added things which have geolocation. It facially identifies people. There's a huge amount of data. It knows what you look like, where you live, what your interests are, who your friends are. If you wanted a surveillance state, it would look like Facebook, except we've done it voluntarily. And I think one of the interesting things here is, how is Facebook in the future going to work with governments? And at the moment, the government right now in the UK is talking about asking Facebook to hand over the details of who you communicate with, not the messages themselves, but just who you communicate with, on the say-so of a police officer. So a police officer puts in a ticket, says, I'm an authorised police officer. I want the details of everybody you've talked to on Facebook for the last year. The law will say, if the government gets its way, Facebook just simply has to comply and hand all of that data across without any further interference, or, not allowed to appeal. There's no involvement of a court, and you, the user, aren't going to know about it. This is an enormous potential privacy abuse. Imagine if you're a celebrity, or maybe you're somebody who's whistleblowed against the police, or maybe you've leaked information about Rupert Murdoch to a journalist, and they bribe a police officer to get your information to see who you've been talking to. There's an enormous avenue for abuse going on here, and I think that, again, is one of the things we've got to be really concerned about.
Turning to you over the line, Andrew McCulloch, is that a concern of you at all, this idea of some kind of big brother database storing all of your personal data?
No, because I think, to be quite honest, there's a degree of anxiety and paranoia here that may not be justified. I was glad to hear the word voluntary mentioned earlier, because it was the first time it had been mentioned. You don't have to go on Facebook. You don't have to go on social media. You can choose other social media. What I do think is that there's a big issue here of consumer empowerment and knowledge, which does concern me, because I think consumers need to know what is happening. They need to understand when they are publishing things and when data is stored. And I do also have a concern about children or people who lack capacity using Facebook and not actually understanding the implications. But there's always a danger that we talk this up and therefore create an air of hysteria which is not fully justified.
Peter, what do you think about that? Is it not fully justified hysteria, or are there genuine concerns about your and my data being used and abused?
Well, I think it's more of the former, because, as it was pointed out twice already today, it is purely voluntary. You don't have to go to Facebook. And I would also like to compare the copies of who people talk to and request by police officers to phone lines. Because before Facebook, before the internet, we had phones, and the police have the right to apply for a wiretap or just look at the records of phones that you've placed. This is a standard legal procedure in a lot of countries, and it does help solve criminal cases. And since Facebook is basically becoming the new medium of choice for communications of all sorts, people, on one hand, should know that everything they do there has the same effect that if they're doing it in the real world, not online. People often forget that if they go online, people think this is not the real world. This is different. No, it's not different. Every rule applies, and people should be held responsible for what they do online, in Facebook per se, the same way they are responsible for what they do in real life. And moreover, they don't have to do it. If you don't want to be held responsible for what you say or post, don't do it.
There's a number of points there, but I wouldn't really entirely agree with. I mean, it's true that it's voluntary, but I'm not sure that it's really so easy for people of 20 or under to avoid Facebook. I think it makes you look socially odd, and there's a certain social pressure which means a lot of people just will be on these platforms no matter what. In terms of the questions around wiretap and comparing it with phone lines, it's absolutely the case that the police can today go to a phone company and get the details of your phone records, who you've been phoning. Does it make it right that a policeman can do that without going through a court? I don't believe so, and in most countries it's a much higher standard. They have to go to court in order to get that information. In the UK, it's self-authorised police requests, and that is a problem. I think you also have to ask about the quantity of data that a police officer may get without supervision here. You go back to 1960 when the sort of practices of getting phone records started. Not everybody had a telephone. When a telephone did exist, it would be shared between a number of individuals, and the cost of making phone calls was pretty prohibitive, so you might only make half a dozen or a couple of dozen calls a week. Now, on Facebook, you're communicating with dozens of people every hour if you're on it, and you're doing that for free, and everybody has an individually identifiable account. So the extent, the accuracy, and the amount of information is of a very, very different order. And that makes it even more important to put judicial safeguards on it. That's not to say that you shouldn't put the information on Facebook should you wish. It's not to say that the police aren't entitled to get that information when they wish to solve crime. It's just to recognise that if you don't want that situation to be abused, you need balanced laws, and that is not what's being proposed in the UK with the Communications Data Bill at present.
Can I just ask you what conclusions you reach based on the things that you're saying? Do you think that there should be no Facebook at all, or are you calling for some very, very heavily regulated form of social media?
I think what we should be doing, we should be looking very carefully what's in the data protection review in Europe at the moment. And the things that they're saying, users, when they have these data-heavy services like Facebook or Google and Gmail, they need an exit path. They need to be able to say, I want all my data back, I want to leave this service, and I want to go somewhere else. And when I go somewhere else, I also want the company to remove all the data and delete it, because I no longer want a relationship with that company. And I think that's the right approach. That's an approach that's being pushed by the European Union, and it would allow some degree of competition. It would increase competition between services. The other thing, though, I think we need is that if Facebook really going to become such a de facto platform for people to interact, and I have to say it is a de facto platform for a lot of people, it should be more porous. There needs to be a thought about how it is that we decide that a service like Facebook should actually allow people to communicate from outside in, so that if you want to communicate with Facebook's users, you don't actually have to be a member. So you don't have to submit all your information to Facebook just to talk to the people there. Now, at the moment, that's their business model, and that has helped them grow as a huge walled garden.
Hang on, you're saying that you think the government should enforce the right of individuals to be able to communicate through Facebook, even if Facebook doesn't want to allow that?
Same as with email or with HTTP protocols, there comes a point where we should think about interoperability questions. So if you want to do certain basic things like message somebody and that person wants you to message them and their preferred platform is Facebook, then there should be some sort of incumbency on that so that those interactions are not wholly always contained by Facebook. I'm just trying to think of ways, or suggesting ways, if you like, of stopping data monopolies from growing, because if we don't try to sort of find ways to do that, then it is possible for market abuse to occur and for users' data and privacy not to be properly protected.
I think there's some really important issues there that Jim's raising. The first thing you've got to start with is a point of informed consent. If you're going to sign up for something like Facebook, you've got to understand what the implications are. And at the moment, it's the Wild West. You really are at the mercy of the people who are running the business. You, despite the laws, don't know what's going to happen with a lot of that data. We really don't understand a lot of the implications. Most people aren't informed enough to do it. So I think we do need some kind of transnational governance model, because the important things for any social network and any network that we're on are trust and provenance. We want to know that we trust the people and that we trust what they're doing with our information, and we trust the information that they're providing. And we want to know that that data is accurate, that the information we're getting is authentic, it's not being manipulated. And I think there's a really, really strong argument as part of, perhaps in the data protection review, that's one way of doing it, but I think it goes beyond what the EU's doing. We actually need to look at industry standards for social networking. So there are open standards for social networking messaging, where what Jim's suggesting is the ability to message into network without being a member of it can occur.
This is the Voice of Russia. The London Bureau of the Voice of Russia is now live on digital radio and online, with news, comment and debate on weekdays between 4 and 7 p.m.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're taking a look at the social networking site Facebook. I'm joined by Andy Williamson, an expert in digital democracy and social media, Jim Killock, who runs the civil liberties body, the Open Rights Group, Andrew McCulloch, who runs the Mental Health Foundation, and Peter Lekarev, our in-house technology commentator. I've noticed that we've focused quite heavily on the negative sides of Facebook. I just wanted to quickly throw it back to you, Andy, because there have been some great developments that have taken place through Facebook, and maybe you could shine a spotlight on those. For example, the use of Facebook as a tool for organizing protests in Egypt against President Hosni Mubarak, also political activism in the US 2008 presidential elections, and all over the world, in Colombia, in Iran, everywhere. Is this a good thing?
Yeah, it absolutely is. This is the thing. The reason Facebook works is there's an awful lot that's good about it. There's a lot that's good about that social networking model. It's bringing us back. You know, we've gone through a few decades in the West of being individuals, and it kind of doesn't work when you want to change things, because one person can't do much. You need to get a group together. And where Facebook works really well is if you think what happens is I suddenly have a spark of an idea. Hey, there's an injustice. Something's wrong here. I need to say something about this. On my own, I don't do much, but when I spread that out through my network, and my networks, you know, the degrees of separation in Facebook, it's about 3.5 degrees of separation now. That means I can get a message out to a lot of people pretty quickly. And if other people in my network feel as strongly as I do, people start picking up that baton and change starts happening. Now, Facebook is never going to create a revolution, but it's pretty good at communicating the need to have it and getting the people together.
Maybe I'll turn to you at that stage, Andrew McCulloch, over the line. Is it about people power and bringing people together?
Yes, I really agree with that. I think this is the main benefit of social media, to access people to each other, to networks. In mental health, it's being used to access people to support networks, access them to evidence-based treatments, to access them to various opportunities for support from each other. And I think that's a model which is happening in a lot of different areas through applications like Facebook. So there are huge benefits there. For me, the main downside is not the privacy issue, although I think there are very serious issues there, so I'd like to acknowledge that. But it's actually there are a group of individuals who actually will use social media as their main form of communication. And that is quite dangerous, because if you move away from face-to-face human contact, you don't actually get the same benefits. You get a different set of benefits, and this can lead to a form of isolation and in some cases depression. But I think you've got to be balanced about this. There are huge benefits. It's here to stay, and we need to work it.
And what do you advocate there? Because you must obviously have read with concern cases of social isolation, which you describe. There have been a number of suicides which have been connected with Facebook, and also bullying and harassment.
Yes, of course. You've got to be very careful about this, because here we are talking about people who are depressed, are anxious, and they're using Facebook. It's not that Facebook creates mental illness, but it does provide both negative and positive opportunities. And that's why mental health organisations are getting out on social media to actually try and talk to those people and move things in a different direction. So, you know, I don't see Facebook as either good or bad. It's a communication methodology. It has limitations because it doesn't involve direct human contact, but it has a massive advantage of the width of the network. So it's just about using it intelligently, really.
Peter, turning to you here. We're running out of time here, but maybe I can ask you one final question. Is Facebook here to stay? Are our lives better, richer, or fuller because of Facebook and online socializing?
I guess for the time being, yes, it is here to stay because there are no foreseeable alternatives in the near future. And as far as making our lives better, it is making our lives different, and it's becoming easier to communicate with people all across the world. Basically, in Facebook, everyone is your neighbor. The time it is required to reach anyone on Facebook is minimal compared to traditional means. And it's also multimedia, which is very important compared to phones, for example. And Facebook basically it's transforming our lives on a lot of different levels. And it was mentioned, the product thing, yes. It's good, but it's kind of destructive at the same time. This is a very, very controversial issue. But what's important, it also allows people, such as artists, to spread the word about their new ideas. It also helps innovators to present some new technology. Basically, Facebook, along with Facebook, came the world viral. Some idea can be transferred through the social network immediately, involving a lot of people. Before that, it was very difficult. MySpace, email, they did not carry the same degree of viral potential that Facebook carries.
Okay, final comments from you, Jim.
I mean, I think Facebook has been a positive force in many ways. I don't want, despite all of my concerns and all of the open rights groups' concerns with Facebook, I have to say, we would say that it's been a positive force, particularly on free expression and the ability of people to organise and self-organise, as people have been saying. Having said that, I think a lot of the benefits are actually the same benefits as we get from the internet in general. And in some ways, what they've done is leverage certain problems around networking that, and many of the other benefits of the net. They've just taken those things and done them a little bit better, a little bit easier, but also in some ways a little bit simpler, maybe a little more coarsely. I think, this sort of innovation is incredibly important, and that, actually preserving the innovation and keeping the internet something where things change and things improve is a really key thing here. And I think there is a little bit of danger that when companies become very established, that starts to die away. And that, in one sense, is why Facebook might not be the product we all use in a few years' time. It's also the danger of the sort of incumbency that they could create through having so many users.
Maybe turning to you, Andy Williamson, for a final comment. Is that fair? Facebook, like the marketplace or the town square, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just a case of how we use it.
It's a tool. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. The difference perhaps between the town square and the marketplace, when we talk about the old idea of the agora, is that you were there talking to people on a fairly level playing field. With Facebook, it's like sitting in the market square with microphones and cameras. So there is a difference there. And I think overwhelmingly, though, Facebook is a positive. I think it has the ability to connect people in a way that we've never been able to do before. Yeah, Facebook's only a tool, and that's the power of the internet. But what we need is a well-designed tool that people buy into. And there are so many people on Facebook now. It's just a good way of keeping in touch. And for me, personally, it extends that long tail of relationships. I'll have a group of people that I might be in regular contact with, most of whom would be in my proximity. But I have friends and acquaintances all around the world, and Facebook lets me talk to them and lets me keep in touch, where 20 years ago I would have found that very, very difficult, and certainly wouldn't have had the level of those relationships that I can choose to have now.
That was Andy Williamson, an expert in digital democracy and social media, saying that Facebook, although there are a few concerns around it, is still a great connector of people. I was also joined by Jim Killock, who runs the civil liberties body, the Open Rights Group, Andrew McCulloch, who runs the Mental Health Foundation, and over the line from Moscow by Peter Lekarev, the Voice of Russia in-house technology commentator. You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl. Stay tuned for the latest update of what's making headlines around the world.